Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Lynn Nesbitt, and I'll be chairing the panel today. Joining me in the panel are Robert Hutchings and Diane Knight. Our recording secretary is Jaswinder Kumar, and our assessor is Kem Wong. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 to 8 on our docket today. Mr. Kumar, please affirm the assessor's and the applicant's testimony.
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you. So, Assessor, please state your full name.
I'm Wong.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. So, Smith, state your full name, please. Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our first item on the docket today is 145 Maryland Avenue. Before we begin, are there any preliminary issues that we need to discuss?
I don't think so.
Not on my end.
Okay, then Mr. Wong, you can start with your testimony, please.
Okay. The subject property is 145 Maryland. The roll number is 120-903-875-00. It's a residential apartment block that's 5 stories high. It was built in 1991 and it has 35 suites with 20 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. Just in the Sherbrooke and Maryland area, south of Portage Avenue. On page 5 is some information on the subject property. This is a nonprofit housing co-op. So using the income and expenses from the nonprofit housing co-op, it will not likely result in a fair representation of market value. So we'll be looking to the market to establish a market value. On page 5 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $1,163 to get a potential income of $488. We used a 3.2% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $472,000. And we used a 49% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $236,000. Capped at 5.3%, we have an estimated market value of $4,469,000. On page 6, on top of page 6, there are some rent comparables showing that the rents we've used are in line with what's in the market. The bottom of page 6 are some expense comparables that range from 44 to 52%, and that supports the what the model has utilized at 49%. On page 7 is a summary of the income and expenses for the subject property. Their income is about $600,000, and their expenses, less amortization and interest, are about $255,000, and their operating income is about $344,000. Keep in mind that this is a nonprofit, and it does include the subsidies, and it also doesn't include any sort of a management fee. Which, if you did include a management fee, the operating income might be about $314,000. On page 8. This is information on how we derived our cap rates. On the bottom of the chart is the multifamily chart, which indicates that the cap rate, the majority of the cap rates between the 20th and 80th percentile are about 4.8 to 5.6%. On page 9 are some cap rate sales. The range for these sales, they range from 3.6% to 5.74%. These cap rates, they're provided to substantiate the cap rate that the models is applying for the subject property. On page 10 is some Altus cap rate information indicating that cap rate for 2020 is 4.3%. This is a national chart, but if you look on page 11, this would be the chart for Winnipeg, and it only goes up to 2018 or 2017, but this chart is pretty much identical to the national chart on the previous page. And so I think the national chart is very similar to the Winnipeg chart, and they're indicating a 4.3% cap rate. And that supports that the 5.3 that we're applying in this case. Page 13. There's some market rent from CMHC for the Midland area. The subject property is comprised of 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and 4 bedrooms. And the indicated market rents for the Midland region is, as you can see, $832, $1,006, and $1,185. And compared to the rest of the Winnipeg market, it seems like the Midland is a little bit lower. So you get the model rent that we've used is in line with it might be a little bit higher than Midland, but it's in line with, but it's a little bit lower than the Winnipeg market rents. So the model rents are supported by the market. And the last page is the statement of operations for the subject property. So, in looking at this from a market perspective, the model rent expenses, the model rent and expenses are supported by the market, and the model cap rate that is applied in this case, 5.3%, is also supported by the market. So, I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $4,469,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Is that the end of your presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, do you have any questions?
I do have a few. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the subject property was built in 1991. And I see the model, the valuation is model driven, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay. And the model has applied a cap rate of 5.3% to this 1991 property?
Yes.
Okay. Just moving forward here. So I believe you had mentioned that you'd produce if you relied on the income and expense, the actual income and expense from the nonprofit properties, you would end up with an inaccurate market value. Is that, am I paraphrasing correctly there?
Yes.
Okay. So when we look at page number 7 here, you've summarized the 2020 income and expense for the subject, and I know you mentioned that it's nonprofit, etc. But that would include $300,000 in MHRC funding in the income line of $600,000, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the actual, well, not the actual, the model driven gross income applied by the city is $488,477 versus the $600,000 that is shown on that page. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Let's bump on a bit here. I would just ask, I guess I'd ask the panel to keep my questions that I ask. They're kind of all encompassing. They're intended for the remainder of our properties today as well. Page number 10, the Altus Group Canadian real estate investment trends here. So we have at the top of the page a chart running from 2006 through post-reference period up to 2022. And then summarized at the bottom, I guess that's a snapshot of 2017 through 2022.
Yeah, it's just enlarged.
Okay, I'm afraid I have a black and white copy here. The bottommost line there, is that the Bank of Canada benchmark?
Yes.
Okay. And it's showing suburban, multifamily, somewhat above that. So
it would be the 4.21.
4.21. Okay. So what we're seeing here is this a national average? Is this is this the lowest rate in each city? I'm just not quite sure what is being summarized here.
I guess it seems like they're indicating that the national average cap rate is 4 point. That's what it's indicating, the national average. But if you look at the 2017, the 2017 cap rate for national wide is 4.5%. But if you look on my page 11, the 2017 for Winnipeg is 4.5% as well. So it seems like they're tracking each other fairly similarly.
So if page 10 is national averages, let's assume it is. So I'm not certain, but let's assume it is. It's showing that the national average in 2020, national average cap rate for multifamily, suburban multifamily, would be 4.3%. And that would include markets such as Toronto, Mississauga, Ottawa, Calgary, Vancouver, etc., right?
It would probably include a lot of the cities in Winnipeg, in Canada.
Okay. And typically, would centers such as that have greater or lesser cap rates than in Winnipeg?
I would say if you're talking about Vancouver and Toronto, it might be lower. But like I said, as indicated in my page 11, their cap rates are around the 4.5 or the low 4s.
Okay, so let's move on to page number 11 then. So this is a chart taken from a presentation by Altus in May 2018. That's what this is?
Yes.
Okay. Historical apartment capitalization rates. Now, I don't have a document from them, but are you saying that Altus was saying the average capitalization rate in Winnipeg in 2017 was 4.5%?
That's what it appears.
Okay. I'm going to have to question that. I think, and I don't present Altus's material in my briefs, as I haven't. It's not my work, and I haven't done their work. But I've looked at many of their briefs over time, including in this cycle, and I would suggest to you that 4.5% is not an average, but that may be the low end of their capitalization rate range. So perhaps is it possible that this chart is representing the best capitalization rate in the Winnipeg market as of those timeframes?
I don't know.
And then this is from 2017. So do we have the material from the valuation timeframe or closer to that date?
No, and that's why I put the national trend on there, because the national trend seems to be tracking Winnipeg fairly closely.
Okay.
And in the national trend in 2020 is indicating 4.3%, which is in line with what it might have been in 2017 at 4.5.
Okay, so again, just to cover that off, so on page 10, we have national market average in 2017 of 4.5%. And then on page 11, we have what I would suggest to you is the best lowest rate in the Winnipeg market at 4.5%. Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions of Mr. Wong's presentation?
I do not. My questions were clarified by already.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, and me either. So go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So 145 Maryland is our first property up today. This is the Westminster Housing Co-op development on Maryland Street, built in 1991. If you look at my page number 3, there's a chart that just gives you a bit of background on the property. So built in 1991, it is a nonprofit multifamily housing cooperative. So it's a co-op housing development. The number of suites, we have a total of 35 overall suites, broken out into 6 1-bedrooms, 13 2-bedrooms, 13 3-bedrooms, and then 3 4-bedroom units. So in looking at this breakout, certainly that's a bit unusual in the marketplace to have such a heavy emphasis on 3 and 4 bedrooms. 4 bedrooms in particular being somewhat unusual in the marketplace in that there's significantly less demand for them. 3 bedrooms as well, and they can be more difficult to lease. So out of the total of 35, we have 16 that are either 3 or 4 bedroom units. The 2023 assessment for the property is $4,469,000, and our valuation for the property as of the valuation date is $3,317,000. We can flip forward to my page number 4 onwards, and we have a couple of photos to look at, 2 of the exterior, and then we get into the interiors on page 5. Some additional common area for the co-op that is less typical in market apartments. You can see common area hallway, and then we get into the units themselves on page 6 and 7. Co-ops, by their nature, certainly as nonprofit entities, the intent of them is to provide low-cost housing for those community members that are in need of that. Low-quality, efficient housing. So when you look at the build-out of these units, they're not luxury apartments, obviously, and not that the city is assessed in that way. Certainly, they haven't. But you can see the type of finish that we're looking at in the kitchen, living room, bathroom, etc. It's of a basic nature, intended to last a while. So that is the interior. Site is shown on page number 10. It's located on the east side of Maryland, south of Broadway, with the map being on page number 11. Let's skip forward to the valuation itself. So, as noted by the city, it is a nonprofit, so we can't directly rely upon their income and expense unless it mirrors market. So we need to examine what fair market value would be for the subject property. Looking at the subject, rent is paid on a rent geared to income basis, so it can't be relied upon in this case. So what we've done is look at the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation's fall average market rent study for Winnipeg. The subject property falls in the Midland area. So if you look at my page number 13, you can see the breakout for 1, 2, and 3 plus bedrooms that they provide, and the average rents for those unit types. I would suggest to you that the subject property is average in its market region in terms of the build out, the size of the units, finish, etc. So we have elected to apply the average CMHC market rents to the subject property. If you look at my page number 14, you can see how this is done, and it once we add up the annual revenue from each unit type, we get a gross rental income of $444,432, which comes out to an average rent of $1,058 divided among the 4 different unit types. To this, we add the parking and laundry revenue that the subject property had for 2020. And we can move on to the expenses for the subject. Now, the City of Winnipeg has applied a vacancy rate of 3.2%. When we look at the stats, it does show vacancy in Midland being somewhat higher than that. We're not asking for a higher vacancy. We have applied the 3.2% in our valuation, but you can see that 1 beds are showing 5.3% vacancy, 2 beds, 6.8, etc. So we have elected to use the 3.2% in our valuation. Moving on to the expense allowance, I have given you a 3-year history of the subject property. They have a year end of March 31st. So we have March 31st, 2019, 2020, and 2021. So exactly at the valuation date. So the expenses for 2021 prior to stabilization came out to $288,913. We've run through the exercise of stabilizing these expenses. You can see how that's done on the chart above. Where appropriate, we've used the 3-year average. Where estimates need to be done, they're based on market experience. And we've adjusted the property management downward as it was higher than the typical 5% effective gross income in the marketplace. As well as reducing the repair and maintenance budget to $1,500 per unit, which brought the expenses down somewhat as well from the level that they were at. I think one thing this points out is that property was built in 1991, and yet it has a repair and maintenance cost for the prior 3 years that's above $1,500 a unit. So the fact that a property is somewhat more recently built doesn't necessarily mean that the repair and maintenance for that property will be typical of the marketplace. It can be somewhat higher due to additional wear and tear, etc. So we've reduced the R&M to $1,500 a unit, and our final stabilized expense allowance comes out to $241,318. So we're roughly $47,000 less than the actual 2021 operating expenses for the property. This expense allowance amounts to 54.8% of effective gross income, which is well within the range of typical operating expense allowances. Let's move on to capitalization rate. And this is a critical piece for our valuation today. So we have a nonprofit entity. It is operated on a rent geared to income basis, and the ownership of the property is a cooperative ownership. So the co-op entity itself, each of the occupants has a share in the ownership of the overall property. So in addition to renting or leasing the individual units, they are also property owners of the cooperative itself. So let's keep that in mind in the overall valuation. my page number 17, we get into capitalization rate and the different aspects to consider. Again, my comments in this particular property carry forward for 6 out of the 8 properties that we're looking at today. So I'll try and only run through this once. Page number 17, let's look at paragraph at the top. Determining market value for affordable housing properties for property assessment is difficult as the properties do not typically transact in the market. Therefore, there are no directly comparable sales to utilize in determining market value. There's exceptionally few, if any, sales of nonprofit properties based on income, the in-place income and expense. In fact, there wouldn't be any based on income and expense. Additionally, the social affordable housing properties cannot legitimately be directly compared to standard market apartment transactions, as social housing properties have considerable restrictions and burdens that are not present for market apartments. These include rental income restrictions, rental market restrictions, smaller pool of potential tenants, additional operating expenses, as I showed on the previous page. Physical condition often can be poorer than typical in the marketplace, and disposition restrictions, as well as other factors that can negatively impact the market value of a social housing property. There's an expert in this field, an accredited commercial appraiser from the United States, who's written a book specific to this particular market segment entitled Valuation and Market Studies for Affordable Housing. I will point out that it's the theory and not the jurisdiction that matters here. Mr. Polton states, developing a market-derived cap rate for an income-restricted property begins with an analysis of the available rates for similar unrestricted properties. Then these rates are adjusted based on the risk factors that an investor would consider in developing a cap rate. The result is a cap rate based on market factors and associated risks. In the final analysis, property tax assessment must take into account the public purpose of the project, the overall benefits and burdens, and the restricted nature of the operating rents. So all that being said, what we need to do is look at the marketplace, look at true market transactions, and make appropriate adjustments in determining a fair capitalization rate to be applied to these type of properties. So let's look at page 17 for our market evidence with regard to true multifamily apartment sales in the city of Winnipeg in the appropriate time frame based on the in-place income and expense. So all of these transactions were based on purchase of the property for the income that they're producing rather than for renovation of that property in order to increase the revenue and thereby change the return to the purchaser of the property. Properties that are purchased for renovation should be excluded from consideration because they are not purchased based on the actual net operating income of that property. They're based on the future potential of that property once renovated, which is the intent of the purchaser on purchase. So what that tends to do is drive higher purchase prices. And of course, if you then take that purchase price and apply it to the actual income and expense, it gives you a false sense of a lower capitalization rate. So looking at page number 17, again, we have a wide variety of sales here, ages, number of units, location in the city. But our sales are taken from 2018 through 2020. They range in size from a low of 6 units, which is the very bottom end, up to a high of 148 units, with the majority of the units falling in between those ranges, obviously. The sale prices are there indicated for you, sale dates, number of suites, the age of the property, and then the capitalization rates upon purchase of that property. So when we look at the cap rate column on the far right-hand side, we have a low capitalization rate of 4.95% for 100 Southview. This is a modern development built in 2015, townhouse complex, 2021 sale, 148 units, very desirable property. That would drive the low end of the range, and there you have 4.95% as the capitalization rate. From there, we go all the way up to 7.9%, which admittedly is generally pretty far outside of the norm. So when you look at the bulk of the capitalization rates, they're falling in that 5.25%, 5.3%, 5.5%, 5.7%, 5.85%. They're in that 5 to 6% range dominantly, is the range that we're seeing. So there's further discussion with regard to properties being purchased for renovation on page 18. We've already covered that. So our range that we're looking at is dominantly in that 5 to 6% range. That's our evidence. Let's move forward and look quickly at the main commercial market brokerages that report on capitalization rates for Winnipeg in their national cap rate reports. Starting on page 19, I've covered Colliers International, and what I've done is provide their cap rate ranges for 2016, 2018, and 2020, just for reference. So when we look at the Colliers capitalization rate ranges as an additional source of backup, essentially, the cap rates remained very stable between 2016 and 2020. We see high-rise apartments, which the subject is not, high-rise apartments varying between 5 and 5.75% in 2016, 5 to 6% in 2018 and 20. Low-rise apartments varying between 5.25% to 6% in 2016 and 5 to 6% in 2018 and 2020. So some very marginal movement there, and certainly not 4.5% as an average, or 4.3% as an average for the city. These are very well-respected commercial brokers that are providing this information that goes into these particular capitalization rate reports that are provided. They provide them on a national basis and break them down by city. And that is the city information for Colliers. Flipping quickly forward through page 20 and 21, same information for CB Richard Ellis. If we look at 2016 and look at Winnipeg, we're looking at cap rates for low-rise apartments between 5.5% and 6% for low-rise A, 5.75 to 6 for low-rise B. Exactly the same for 2018. And when we look at the 2020 information on page number 21, marginal change to 5.25% to 5.75% and 5.5 to 6% for low-rise B. So the national market participants, commercial brokers, capitalization rate reports that they provide do support the actual evidence that we're providing to you on page 17 in stating that the range is typically 5 to 6% overall, and generally 5.25% up to 6%. So what's an appropriate cap rate for the subject property? Well, as I'd stated, it's a nonprofit entity, so you have a number of factors that come into play here that don't come into play in standard market apartments. Typically, you have rental income restrictions, which we do. It's rent geared to income. Smaller pool of tenants, only the particular ones that qualify are able to rent here. We have additional operating expenses as shown on the previous 3 years above the norm. And physical condition, as you can see, it can get a bit run down in relation to the actual date of construction. Deferred maintenance, lack of a reserve fund often, and finally, disposition restrictions. So we have a cooperative housing property here. The actual co-op residents have an ownership stake in the property, and they all have the ability to vote on any potential disposition. Obviously, they are there as residents of limited means, I guess you could say, paying rent geared to income. Their voice would be heard by the board and taken into account with regard to any potential disposition. And essentially, there would be no sale of the property. So let's look at this from the outside perspective of an investor. You're looking at a property that is a nonprofit. You would be limited to you can't purchase the property and immediately go in and change the rents on the units. You can't go in and immediately boost your revenue. There is not a typical return for any potential investor on this property. So they would take that into account on their purchase of the property, whether that be in the short term or the long term hold of that particular property. So looking at an appropriate cap rate for the subject property, we believe that a cap rate of 6% is appropriate in valuing the subject. And we have summarized our valuation on page number 23. If you care to flip to there, you can see our valuation on the left-hand side of the page compared to the city's valuation on the right-hand side of the page. So we come down to net operating income. So we've applied average rental rates to the subject property, which are appropriate. Used the minimal market vacancy, despite it being higher for that particular area. The expenses we've stabilized and brought down considerably to market norms at 241. And using our cap rate of 6% gives us a final market value of $3,317,000. And the addenda materials for the subject property give you the income and expense for it. And I believe, yes, that is my presentation, and I'm open for any questions there may be.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Wong, do you have any questions? You're on mute. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry. I was cutting out a little bit, and I think I froze for a little bit as well.
Okay.
Sorry. Regarding, I guess, just wondering, in your opinion, would the operation of a co-op operate differently than a for-profit apartment?
In what way, Mr. Wong?
In terms of the rents or the maintenance of the property or the utilities being paid?
So certainly with regard to rents, the rents will be different from a standard market apartment. As noted, this is a rent geared to income situation in which the residents need to qualify to rent the units based on their means, and then they receive subsidies from government programs to bring them up to a break-even level. Now, with regard to the expenses, we've gone through that exercise of eliminating any potential additional expenses that one might see. Certainly, in terms of your insurance, your taxes, your utilities, those are going to be identical. The property management has been brought down to a market level, as has R&M. As I noted many times in nonprofits, you can have somewhat higher expenses with regard to R&M just due to wear and tear versus a normal market apartment. So that has been accounted for in the valuation.
Okay. So it typically would operate differently than a market apartment building.
Only in the ways that I described, yes.
Okay. And sorry, on your page 18.
Yeah.
It just sort of says that the buildings which have renovation or conversion potential may be purchased at a premium due to a future expected income following the renovation. Would the subject property be a good candidate for renovation or conversion?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because this is an important point to note. If you read the text on page 18 and listen to my discussion earlier, there are a number of properties that sell in the Winnipeg marketplace where the purchasers are not buying the in-place income and expense. They're buying the future income and expense. Once they've renovated the property, they buy the property with that intent. They finance it with that intent based on future revenues and future expenses based on a renovated property. So what those particular transactions show is capitalization rates that are not based on the income and expense. So they are specifically excluded both from in assessment methodology as well as appraisal methodology from consideration as true capitalization rates to be considered in arriving at fair market value. And for assessment purposes, you cannot be valuing the property based on what its future potential can be with regard to any potential renovation and increase in revenue. Otherwise, we could ascribe any particular lift in value based on a renovated state of an office, industrial, etc. All properties, really, right? So the fact that a property can or can't be renovated doesn't come into play for assessment, because that is not what we're valuing.
So are you aware that there are appraisers that use sales that were intended for renovations as in their cap rate analysis, in their appraisals?
I'm 100% aware of that, and what's being done there, Mr. Wong, is we're looking at apples and oranges there. what you're looking at from the appraisal perspective and from that purchaser perspective. So the purchaser comes along, they're going to buy property X for whatever value they've placed on it based on their future renovated net operating income for that. So they finance that property based on the potential of that property once renovated, and that's how those properties are appraised. So they're appraised for their future value, but that is not the value of the property as it sits as of the valuation date. It's a potential future value. So they're two very different things. They're valuing it for financing based on its future potential.
But if you just looked at the income in place and the sale price, the cap rates could be lower, correct?
Well, they would be lower, but as I've explained, it's based on a false derivation of a cap rate, because it's not the intent of the purchaser is not to buy the property as it stands as of that valuation date. They're basing their purchase price on a slight lift in value over typical market to the vendor in order to get them to sell, so that the purchaser can then lift the value further by renovating the property and increasing their the return to them based on that increased revenue flow.
Okay, but just based off of the known information with regards to sale price and operating income, the cap rates could be lower?
They would be lower, and they, according to appraisal and assessment methodology from the IAAO, which I believe is the guiding body for assessors, those transactions are deemed ineligible for consideration as true capitalization rates because of the purchase based on a future potential of the property. So whether they're lower or not, it doesn't matter, because they're not true cap rates. So they are stricken from being considered.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Hutchings, do you have any questions?
Yes, just a couple of quick ones. I'm looking at page 17, Trevor, of your cap rate comparisons.
Yes.
And I'm looking at the fourth column, H-Reno, and I'm focusing on some similar unit buildings, and I'm looking at number 5703 St. Anne's Road. Is that the effective year built, or is that the original year built?
No, that's the actual year built.
So the Reno, when you say age Reno at the top of the column, is that referring to an effective year built, possibly?
No, it's not. All I've indicated there, Mr. Hutchings, is the actual date of construction. So okay. 703 St. Anne's was built in 2020. The Reno probably should have been removed from the top of that column.
Okay. So the other one I was looking at with similar units is 512 Balmoral, and it's saying it was built in 1972. Would that be accurate?
That would be accurate, yes.
Okay, that's my only question on that page. And just to clarify, you said the residents in this co-op had a stake in the building. This is not a life lease, is that correct?
It's not a life lease, it's a cooperative housing entity.
Okay, so there's no entrance fee?
There is no entrance fee.
And
a damage deposit.
Okay, and the co-op is responsible for all repair and maintenance on the building. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchings. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
So referring to your page 17, that cap rate, is that the sale price with the cap rate, is that including commissions, or commissions are out of there?
This would be prior to commissions.
Okay, and then on your page 16, the repair and maintenance, are you saying that the repair and maintenance costs in this type of building are because they put in inferior products, so it needs to be fixed more? Is that why it's so high?
No, no. What I was indicating is that often in a nonprofit, what we find is that there can, not always, there can be additional repair and maintenance, not because of the inferiority of any furnishings or anything of that nature. It's more wear and tear in some circumstances based on the occupancy of the property.
So the occupant not taking care of things properly, is that what you're meaning?
I'm sorry, I missed your question.
Sure, the occupant not taking care of things?
Perhaps not taking care of things to the same extent that they would if they had.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out why, and that. Okay, that's all. That's my questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I just have a quick question about vacancy. Mr. Smith, I know you've used the model vacancy rate of 3.2%, but I think you did indicate at one point that 3 and 4 bedroom suites are difficult to lease. And you suggested that the vacancy rate could be higher. Why didn't you use a different vacancy rate?
Well, so in our methodology of valuing it, we're looking at the overall market value of the property, right? So we don't necessarily, you need to keep the overall value in mind rather than, if the vacancy for Midland says 7%, just blindly applying 7%, if perhaps the property isn't necessarily getting 7% vacancy, or if you don't feel that it would be appropriate to apply that in the overall valuation. Yeah, it's quite easy to look at each component and have slight variations that add up to a very large difference on the overall value. So in the grander scheme of the value, we did not apply a larger vacancy. When you look at our capitalization rate of 6%, based on the reasons that we've provided you, vacancy is also one of the considerations in that selection of the cap rate as well.
And with regard to that vacancy, you indicated that the nature of this housing, you'd apply a higher cap rate. Is there, would you suggest a 0.5 premium because of this property? What are you, do you have a sense of what it is generally? Can you put a number to it, or is it just higher?
Unfortunately, we don't have market transactions to make those adjustments based on actual transactions. So it's professional opinion looking at the evidence. So we have cooperative housing property. We have 16 3 and 4 bedrooms in the area. We do have higher vacancy. We obviously have the issues surrounding nonprofits and any transaction of those in general. And the range that we're seeing in the marketplace was in that 5.25% to 5.75% roughly in the transactions that we provided you, with the market participants showing 5 to 6%. So we're at the upper end of that market evidence range at 6%.
Madam Chair, I have one further question.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Based on what you just said, at the time of this assessment is being done, was there vacancy in those 3 and 4 bedrooms?
I'm afraid they didn't provide that information in their income and expense. And when you look at the I&E, they provide their actual. actual year-end statement of financial position. And it doesn't specifically break out a vacancy number, but of course, that also can vary from year to year as well.
Right.
They're indicating roughly $4,200 in uncollectible bad debt for 2020, but that again, that doesn't account for any vacancy. There's always vacancy upon move in and move out as well. So that wouldn't account for any of that.
Okay, thank you.
And I have no further questions. Mr. Wong, is there a desire for summation?
No.
Mr. Smith?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that concludes item number 1 on our agenda. We'll now move to item number 2 on our agenda. 442 William Avenue. So Mr. Wong, when you're ready.
Okay, the subject property is 442 William Avenue. The roll number is 130-612-18000. This is a residential apartment block that's 3 stories high. It was built in 1905, but we have an effective year built of 1961. There's 30 units with 12 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. It's located near William and Isabel. On page 4 is some information on the subject property indicating that it's a nonprofit co-op. And so once again, because it is a nonprofit co-op, it might be difficult to pick and choose which items to include for valuation purposes. So we're going to look to the market for their income and expenses. But on page 5 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $625 to get a potential income of $217,000. We use a 3.2% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $210,000. And we used a 49% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $105,000. Capped at 5.85% of an estimated market value of $1,807,000. On page 6 are our rent comparables. Shows that the rents we've used are in line with what's in the market. On the bottom of page 6 are some expense comparables ranging from 44 to 52%, indicating that the 49% that the model is applied is in line with what's in the market. And on page 7 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the owner. It's similar to the previous property. On page 8 is information on how we derived our cap rates. On page 9 are some cap rate sales. It's once again ranging from 3.6 to 5.74%, substantiating the cap rate that the model is applied in this case. And on page 10 and 11 is some Altus cap rate information, indicating the cap rate for 2020 to be 4.3%. On page 13, some there are the CMHC market rents. The subject property is in the Centennial area, and you can see that the rents are for 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom are $975 and $1,291, and even in the neighboring neighborhood or area of Lord Selkirk, the rents are $764 and $961. So the rent that the model is applied in this case at $625 is looks to be below what's the market. So the market rents do support model rents at $625, and the model expenses are supported by market expenses, as well as that the model cap rate is also supported by market sales. And so I ask that you maintain that the assessed value at $1,807,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Smith, do you have any questions?
Yes, just briefly, page 6. So comparables 2, 3, and 4 are all quite close to the modeled average rent, I believe, correct?
Yes.
And the income and expense summary again on page 7, this would include CMHC funding of $270,000 roughly.
Yeah.
So that would
does, and I believe that I guess they're providing that subsidy to because that's what's necessary for the operation of the building.
correct, right? But that it is included in that top income line.
Yes.
Okay. And the city's income is $217,604.
Yes.
I believe. Okay. And I hate to ask this question. It's in looking at pages 10 and 11. So I guess we're inferring that in your, I believe what you're inferring is that the national and the Winnipeg capitalization rates shown by Altus are quite similar. Is that correct?
Yes.
So in your experience in the 2023 assessment cycle with Altus represented properties, are they using a capitalization rate across the board or typically of 4.3%?
No, I'm not sure why they have different cap rates for when they speak at a forum and the cap rates that they present at the Board of Revision. I'm not sure why they're different.
Those are all of my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Wong, I'm looking at the photo of the subject property. Original age was 1905 or 6, I believe. Was this building gutted and then turned into a co-op housing with suites? 29 suites, 29 units, pardon me. Would that be obviously to reflect that effective year of 1961? There's been some major renovations. Do you have any notes on that at all, permits or anything?
Unfortunately, I do not have any notes, but the effective year being changed from 1905 to 1961, it would indicate that the property was changed from one use to maybe that wasn't multifamily to a multifamily use. But unfortunately, I don't have any notes to indicate that. But usually, when there's a large change in effective year built, that usually means that there's been a reasonable amount of work that has been done, and it seems like this one it might have been changed from one use to another.
Okay, that's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchings. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
I do. On page 1, you tell us there's 30 suites, but on page 5, I think it is, you say there's 29. So which is it?
29.
It is 29?
Yeah,
okay.
It's 29. Unfortunately, these two fields they're not linked together.
Okay. Just wanted to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have no questions. So Mr. Smith, when you're ready with your presentation.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So subject property 442 William. This was originally constructed in 1905 as what was called a normal school. So they were built for teacher training. So there was classroom space as well as your typical 1905 version of a gymnasium a multi-purpose room, of a library, etc. So we're talking about a 1905 school building that has since been repurposed. So bit of background, built in 1905, it stayed as a teacher training facility for quite a number of years until that was moved, that particular program was moved elsewhere. It had a fallow time. I think it was then used at one point by the military for a short period of time. And then sometime in the 1960s, it went vacant and remained that way until 1992, when it was taken over by Philcassa Housing Co-op Limited, which then proceeded to turn the property into a nonprofit seniors housing property with a total of 29 suites. So we're looking at a school building that has been converted in 1992. The effective year built, I mean, that's fine. It's the structure itself is of 1905 vintage, and you're making modifications to the build out of that, which obviously causes issues with regard to heating, ventilating, etc. Code issues. It's not a building that's particularly well designed to conversion to multifamily use, but that is what has been done with it. So that should be kept in mind in terms of the valuation as well. We're not dealing with a 1961 property or a 1992 property. We're dealing with a converted 1905 property. So page 3 gives you background. We have the 2020 assessment at $1,807,000. You have the two prior assessments, which had very marginal reductions for some reason. Both of these have been appealed to the municipal board, and we're awaiting scheduling of that, as well as case management. Bit of background on the chart there as well. 29 total units, 19 one-beds, and 10 two-bedroom units. The suite interiors are small. They have a very basic level of finish, and they have not been improved since 1992. So they're significantly worn with lots of evidence of wear and tear, and it would be considered in below average condition. Again, this is a cooperative housing facility, and nonprofit seniors are the occupants. So let's look at the photos beginning on page 4. A couple of the exteriors, you can obviously see the vintage. And then the interiors, page 5, again, was one of the classroom or multi-purpose spaces that remains that way. You see the finish in the hallways, and then the units themselves, the cramped nature of them. The bedrooms are quite petite. And that is the physical structure itself. So where is it located? The site is shown on page number 8. So we're west of Main Street, obviously, on the southeast corner of William and Gertie, towards the CPR tracks there. And between Main Street and the Health Sciences Center, closer to Main Street, with the property location being shown on page number 9. So that has an impact as well on the overall valuation, the location, obviously. So let's look at market valuation. What would an appropriate rent be for the subject property? Obviously, it's rent geared to income, so we can't rely on that. Given the small size of the units themselves, their condition and build outs, wear and tear, they would rent for lower than the market norms. The CMHC, if you look at the market average for the core area, which we've provided for you there, The averages are shown there, $935 for 1 beds, $1,213 for 2 beds. We've made a deduction of 5% overall to these averages based on the size and condition and location of the units. So applying those rents to the subject property gives us our gross rental income of $217,604. Now, actually, I'm sorry, the text that I'm reading here is in reference to one of our other properties today, where we are actually in agreement with the rental rate for the subject property for this property with the city, as we do feel that it is reflective of what it would actually rent for on the market, given the size and condition of the units. So we're in agreement on the rental income. Moving forward, we haven't changed the vacancy rate. Again, it would be higher in the subject area, but we're not making that adjustment. And the expense allowance for the subject property. So when we look at page number 13, we have subject property had the expenses as stated there in 2020 and 2019. These would result in expense allowances of 90 and 86%. Obviously, that's not supportable as far as arriving at a fair market value, so we can't rely on those overall figures. What we've done to arrive at a fair expense allowance for the subject is we've looked at the prior cycle's expense allowance estimate of $122,656. And if we flip forward briefly, sorry, to page number 20, give everybody a moment to get there. The City of Winnipeg in the 2020 assessment allowed a 58.23% vacancy allowance. I'm assuming based on the vintage of the property, location, etc., 58.23% was what they allowed. They've since reduced this by roughly 10%, despite we're not seeing operating expenses decreasing, certainly. But so what we have done in order to arrive at a fair estimate is use that initial 58.23%, which is from 2020, and we've reduced that in that we have adjusted the property management charge, which was significantly above market. We've reduced that to 5% of the effective gross income. And we've also reduced it by taking out any extra expenses that should not be included, such as resident council expenses or things of that nature that would not be typical in a normal operating situation. So we have reduced it from the 58.23% down to 52.8%, which gives us $111,208 as our expense allowance. Again, not ideal, but in this situation with the 1905 structure, obviously there's going to be some additional expenses, and we can't rely on the overall number or even an adjusted measure of that to give us an appropriate expense allowance. So you can see how we've done that. I feel it's certainly fair. Capitalization rate, we have the same situation as the last property, a nonprofit seniors housing co-op. All of my same commentary remains the same. Beyond that, we have a property located where it is on William. It's built in 1905, whether it's been renovated for multifamily use in 1992 or not. The structure is still of 1905 vintage, and it sits in that area west of Main Street, which would be a less desirable area of the city for acquisition of an income producing property. So we've applied a cap rate of 6.5% to our valuation. And if you look at page number 20, gives you the summary of this. We're in agreement on the rent, vacancy rate. We have an adjusted expense allowance. You can see that the city's dropped their expense allowance by 10% or $23,000 roughly. And we use a cap rate of 6.5%, giving us a final market value of $1,530,000. And in the addenda, you can see that they state that they have had significant costs with regard to COVID as well. That is my presentation, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Wong, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Mr. Hutchings?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Knight?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, I just did have a question about the 6.5 cap rate. I'm looking at other properties on your chart. Just trying, and sorry, I'm rambling a little bit here. 1961 property, 5.01. 1962 property, 7.9. 1959, 5.7. So they're in the, with the exception of that one, which is at 7.9, they're all sort of in that mid-5 range. So in this one, you've added a premium of 1. Why would you increase it that much more?
So, and I've gone through my selection of the cap rate of 6% for the last property there. It was built in 92, but we're applying 6% cap rate for the reasons that we did. In addition to those, because all of those same things hold true here, we have a property on the corner of William in that west of, I'm not sure what you would term that particular area. Don't believe that they outline a particular West Alexander, call it, area west of Main Street. It's a less than ideal area in terms of owning capital assets, in terms of being an investor. An investor is going to apply a greater cap rate because of the area. In addition to that, we don't have a 1961 property. We have a converted 1905 property that is not, we have tiny units. We have issues with the systems because of the building not being intended for its original purpose. You have all the issues that you have with a 1905 structure that you wouldn't have to the same degree with a 1961 one. So when I look at the comps that you pointed out on page 8, so I think you had mentioned 510 Gray as one of them.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the ages for sure as one measure.
So 15 Edison, number 8, I think you'd mentioned as well, built in 61, just over 5% cap. Considerably better location than the subject property up in North Kildonan, East Kildonan. 510 Gray would be much more comparable to the subject property. It's in that kind of East Elmwood area towards the industrial, kind of on the border of the industrial, I believe. 7.9% cap. Obviously, that's an outlier, and I'm not applying a 7.9% cap. But this location has much more in common with that than with Edison, say.
So are any of these comparables that were, or examples that you brought forward close to the subject property. I don't really know. 470 Alexander, don't know. Notre Dame, don't know.
The Notre Dame property is closer in. Alexander, I'm trying to remember where on Alexander that's located. That might be more close in terms of a similar location than the subject.
Okay. I was just trying to get a sense of location.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wong, is there a desire for summation?
No, thank you.
Mr. Smith?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody need to take a break, or should we carry on with our next item?
I could use a quick break, please.
Okay, so
Maybe
let's
5
take
minutes.
a 10-minute break, 5 minutes if we're all back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We're now on item 3407 Wardlaw Avenue. Mr. Wong, when you're ready, please begin.
The subject property is 407 Wardlaw Avenue. The roll number is 120-211-85000. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It was built in 1985 and has 6 units with 5 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. It's just inside the Osborne Village area. On page 5 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $941. You get a potential income of $67,000. It's a 3.2% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $65,000. And we used a 47% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $35,000. Capped at 5.15%, we have an estimated market value of $671,000. On page 7 is on page 6 are some rent comparables showing that the rent reviews are in line with what's in the market. And on page the bottom of page 6 are some expense comparables ranging from 43 to 52%, which supports the 47% that the model is applied for the subject property. On page 7 is a summary of the income and expenses. You can see in 2020 their income was $63,000 and their expenses were $49,000. So their operating income was $13,000 in 2020. In 2019, their income was $64,000 and their expenses were $65,000. So their net operating income was negative $1,655. This is, I guess, on my page 4, it does indicate that there's a nonprofit housing. On page 8 and 9 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales. On page 10 and 11 is some Altus cap rate information. On page 13 are some CMHC rents. Well, 1-bedroom rents for the Fort Rouge area is about $102, and it supports the model rent that's been applied, which is $941. So when looking to the market, the model rent that we've applied, that has been applied, is supported by the market, as are the expenses, and the cap rate is also supported by the market. So I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $671,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Smith, do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Thank you. Ms. Knight,
I have no questions.
Mr. Hutchings,
No questions, thank you.
and thank you. I just have one little question, if you could just clarify. I just need to find it, sorry. Page 4. At the very top, the heading,
Yeah.
is this a life lease?
Well, actually, if you kind of, it is a little bit confusing in the sense that it's lifelease.ca, but it's sort of lifelease.ca/nonprofit rental housing projects.
Okay.
And so in this particular case, it's not a life lease. It's just, it appears to be a nonprofit affordable housing.
Okay, so just a bad title for the website.
Well, the thing is, yeah, it's just where the information came from.
Okay, and that came from. Okay, lifelease.ca.
Lifelease.ca, but I guess they list information on properties that are not life leases as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Smith, whenever you're ready with your presentation, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to clarify that for everybody, Murdoch Management is the property management firm that looks after quite a number of these nonprofits that we're dealing with here today. And their website, as they have a lot of life leases, and I guess they were focused on that when they established their website, is lifelease.ca. So that's the background. It is just a nonprofit housing property that we're looking at here. It's not a life lease.
Okay,
So
thank you.
407 Wardlaw, built in 1985. We are looking at all 2-bedroom units, 6 of them. And you can see brief background on my page number 3 of the property, and we can move forward into the photographs. So we have 2 of the exterior. You can see the property built in 85, typical of that time frame. They have that kind of cedar siding in some areas, significantly worn, obviously. One of the rear at the bottom of page 4, you can see some spalling of the stucco on the side of the building. They have a lot of water penetration issues in this particular property, both from the roof and some from just the exterior envelope in general. We'll move into the inside. Nothing has changed since 85, essentially. It's of that vintage and significantly worn over that time frame, as you'll see from the photos. So that kind of 85 kitchen at the bottom of page 6. We have the standard tile flooring, which you can see the wear on the walls, etc., etc. We have some water penetration issues showing on the bottom of page 9 there, coming from the roof, and just general wear and tear of the units themselves. This is not all one unit, it's various units. So the building is in somewhat lower than average condition. The site is shown on page 10 and the location on page 11. We can move into the income valuation. The housing charge for the units is $798 a month. This is on the low side. However, we do feel that given the condition of the units, that it is appropriate for the subject. So we have applied the in-place housing charge of $798 in this instance. To that, we add the parking revenue that they had from 2020, and there is no on-site laundry in the building, so there is no laundry revenue. On the expense side, we're deferring to the City of Winnipeg vacancy rate of 3.2%. The actual expenses themselves, so the 2020 expenses for the building were just over $49,000. This would be 87% of effective gross income. We can't base a fair market value on that. Obviously, that would be inaccurate and grossly underestimated, so we're not using that. So we have deferred to the city's expense allowance of 47.3% for the subject. And I believe in this instance, given I know that the condition of the property is poor, and it is in a looking at capitalization rate, I believe we are in agreement with the City of Winnipeg for the subject property. So we're looking at below average property in terms of condition. However, it's only 6 units. They are 2-bedroom units, which is a plus. And it's located in Osborne Village. We're not looking at 140 units or 60 units, etc., which would make things more challenging upon a purchase. So in this instance, we are in agreement with the cap rate of 5.15%. So if we look at page 21, our valuation is summarized. In-place rent, market vacancy of 3.2, same expense allowance as the city, and the same cap rate gives us $578,000. And that is my report, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Wong, do you have any questions?
Sorry.
Yeah.
No questions.
No questions. Thank you. Mr. Hutchings?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight?
So I just have a question of clarity. So just to be clarified, the difference here is the gross potential rent of approximately $9,000 and the expenses of approximately $5,000. We're agreeing on cap rate, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions. That concludes item number 3. Item number 4 on our agenda is 519 Burnell Street. Mr. Wong, whenever you're ready.
Subject property is 519 Burnell Street. The roll number is 130-304-32100. This is a residential apartment block that's 3 stories high. It was built in 1914. But we have an effective year built range from 1914 to 1944. It has 80 suites with 24 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. It's just near Ellis and Arlington Street. Sorry. On page 4 are some pictures of the inside of the property. The property has been renovated. On page 5 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $777 to get a potential income of $746,000. We used a 15% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $634,000. And we used a 51% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $305,000, capped at 6% of an estimated market value of $5,093,000. And it appears that they do have some vacancy issues, and so that's why we've applied a override vacancy of 15% just to recognize the challenges that this building is having. On page 6 are some rent comparables showing that the rents we've used are in line with what's in the market. On page 7 is our income and expense summary. In 2020, their income was $677,000, and their expenses were $356,000, and the resulting net operating income is $320,000. This supports the $320,000 supports the model operating income of $305,000. So their actuals are about $15,000 higher. On page 8 and 9 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales. On page 10 and 11 is some Altus cap rate information indicating the cap rate to be 4.3%. On the last page is the income and expenses submitted by the owner. So when you look at their actual net operating income, it does support the model, and it does support it's about 15,000 higher than what the model is indicating, and the model cap rate is supported by the market. So I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $5,093,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Smith, do you have any questions?
Yes, just one really. The page number 7, the income and expense summary there for 2020. So that calculation to get down to the net operating income of $320,934. That doesn't include any deduction for vacancy or bad debt, correct?
I believe that the number is inclusive of vacancy and bad debt.
So if I flip to the page number 13, they're indicating total expenses of $356,173, which is what you've got here, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then their income is the income, so that's the same. So there is no vacancy or bad debt deduction in that calculation, I believe. Is that fair?
I believe that their indicated income is what they collected.
Okay, so when I look at your page number 13, which is their submitted income and expense information to the city for the relevant period, they've indicated a vacancy of $77,000+ and bad debts of $13,000+. When I make these deductions to the figures on page 7, in order to arrive at net operating income, I come to a value of $230,781. Is that fair to say?
I'm not sure. Like when I guess how I made that calculation was just taking their total income, which is $678,000, and subtracting their indicated expenses at $356,000.
Right. So just to expand on it then, I guess, and I don't want to belabor the point by any means, but when we look at their income value summary, the methodology of getting down to the NOI includes the deduction of vacancy, which is also inclusive of bad debt typically. So if we take off those amounts for that particular point in time, we have an NOI of roughly $230,000. That's my only question, I guess.
Yeah, just on page 13, their indicated net operating income is $321,000. So I think that's pretty close.
So, and I really don't want to keep going on about this, but
okay, I guess that's where I got it from.
Okay, fair enough. The way that this is structured, and this is the city's form, is it doesn't indicate, in order to arrive at a net operating income that they've got on their form, they don't indicate deduct your vacancy and bad debts here, which is what you have to do in order to arrive at an NOI. But they do have a line for you to include it in. But they don't include those those line numbers in the deductions in order to arrive at an NOI. Just wanted to clarify that. That's all of my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Wong, did you want to respond to that or?
No, I think we've done that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hutchings, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Knight?
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask for further clarity here. So, Mr. Wong, when you say that they have $654,271.06 of income, that's the actual income that they have received that year, not including bad debts. Not that would include it all because that's the monies that they actually received.
I believe so. Like I indicated 678, and if you look on page 13, it's indicating 678.
Right. So that would take that into inclusion. That part on the second page here, when they talk about vacancy and bad debt, that's just how they get to the 654 residential apartment suites on line 105. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Smith? Whenever you're ready with your presentation, please.
Okay, thank you. So hopefully that was clear. And we're looking at, we need to keep in mind this is a point in time. So I'm not saying that the NOI should be $230,000 every year or anything of that nature. Things do change, but as of the point in time, we are looking at considerably lower net operating income than the city is projecting. The way the sheet is set up is misleading when you come down to the net operating line because it doesn't allow for that deduction of vacancy and bad debt. Anyway, moving forward, 519 Brunel, property built in 1914. As you can see, for the subject property built again 1914 with some later additions. The city has applied a cap rate of 6% to this particular property. I think that's notable. Let's look at a bit of background. The 2020 assessment for the subject property, for whatever reason, was not reduced at the Board of Revision. And we have this under appeal at the Municipal Board. The 2018 assessment had a significant reduction at the Board of Revision, as you can see in the chart on page number 3. Further background, zoned R2. We have a total of 80 units, 55 of them being 1 beds, 24 2 beds, and 1 bachelor unit. Description of the property is on page 3. Masonry construction on wood frame, masonry and stone foundation, typical of construction of that era. So obviously not modern construction techniques or materials. Common hallways have dated and worn wooden hardwood flooring, plaster walls. Suites are older, worn hardwood flooring with plaster walls. Kitchen and bathrooms, generally low level of finish. Heating is via electric baseboard units, and the units themselves are relatively small. That covers that. The photos begin on page 4. Gravel parking lot on one side of the building. You can see it's kind of a U-shaped structure itself. A bunch of the exteriors, ongoing issues in the back lane with regard to graffiti and other activities occurring in the back lane. You can see part of the structure on page 6. Obviously, common areas on the bottom of page 6, and then we get into the units themselves as well. So you can see kitchen in page number 8. Some of the security issues shown on the top of page 9 with the door jamb, and part of the basement shown at the bottom of page 9. Site is shown on page 10. We have only 15 parking stalls for the subject for a total of 80 units. And it's located in the west end of Winnipeg, as noted on page 11, significantly economically disadvantaged area with social and economic problems, which obviously have an impact on property values. So let's move on. Sale history is shown on page 12. We had a declining property value. 900,000 in 2004 was a valid sale transaction in 2007 for 655,000, and then 450,000 in 2008. Subsequently, the property went into receivership when the owner was unable to pay the mortgage. This happened in 2015, December 2015. Since that time, it has been professionally managed, and Grant Thornton is the receiver for the property. It has undergone some change over that time since 2015, all of which are accounted for in our valuation of the property, as well as the prior assessments valuations of the property. So let's move into valuation, page 13. We have the in-place rental structure for the subject property, $722 per month for the 1 beds, $862 for the 2 beds. So as you can see, we come out to $731,000 plus. To this, we add the parking revenue and the laundry revenue. When we add the two of these to the gross income, I believe we come out marginally above what the city's projected. So I won't go into detail there. Subject property in 2020 had a vacancy of 12.3%. It was greater than that in prior years. We are in agreement with the city's 15% vacancy allowance for the subject. And the expenses for the subject are $343,068 in 2020. We did not have additional years in which to look at to stabilize the property. It didn't seem out of line. That equates to 59% of effective gross income. Typically, we do see older buildings typically having greater expense percentages up to that kind of 60% level, sometimes marginally higher. So the subject is not out of line in that regard. When you compare that to the averaging that takes place by the city's model, it is an outlier because of the age of the property. It is going to have greater expenses. So all of that is indicated on the income and expense that's included in the addenda. And so we use the actual in-place expense of $343,068. We have the same materials with regard to capitalization rates for you here. In this case, this is a market apartment. It's not a nonprofit. It's not a cooperative. It's not seniors housing or any of those things. It is a nonprofit. And we are in agreement with the city's 6% cap rate for this particular property based on the discussion we've had here. So applying 6% cap rate to the actuals, again, gets us a market value of $4,965,000. And that is my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Wong, do you have any questions?
Yes. On your addendum, page 85,
Okay, let us just get there too.
Sure, it's at the end, second from the end. Or actually, it is the last page.
Yep.
So their revenue total of 673,000 and includes 77,000 worth of vacancy.
It does appear that way, yes.
And their net operating income is 321,000 at the bottom.
That would contradict what they had put on their income and expense form. So I apologize for their confusion and subsequently mine.
Well, yeah, just on, I guess on page A2, it's indicating 321,000 as well. Is that correct?
Well, it's correct as to how they've done it here, yes. So as you'd noted, they've done it in two different ways, which is significantly confusing. So I apologize for any confusion over that matter.
Well, no, it's, I mean, it's okay.
To be honest, I didn't look at this page A5 in any great detail.
Okay, and so their indicated net operating income is 321,000.
That seems to be what they're saying.
And on your page 21.
Yep.
You're indicating a net operating income of 297,000, about 21 or 23,000 lower.
So let's go through it step by step here. I was kind of hopeful, Mr. Wong, that being so close in value that we'd be in agreement on this one, but let's look at it. So we have rental income of $731,000, which is backed up
okay.
by
I just wanted to,
number
it was
and if we look at the valuation parameters, the subject property had at that point in time roughly 12.5% vacancy, significantly more than that in prior years. 15% is more than allowable, and their actual expense allowance was 343,068 once you go through the numbers and make any deductions that should be done. So yes, the actual net operating income for our purposes should be $297,924.
That's all my questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hutchings?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Knight?
Mr. Wong clarified my question. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions, so we'll move on to item number 5 on our agenda, 257 Toronto Street. Mr. Wong, whenever you're ready.
Okay, the subject property is 257 Toronto Street. The roll number is 13040415100. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It was built in 1966, but we have an effective year built in 1974. It's indicating that there has been some work done to the property. There's 17 suites with 9 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. On page 4 are some pictures of the inside of the property from the property manager's website. On page 5 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $919 to get a potential income of $187,000. We used 3.2% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $181,000, and we used a 47% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $94,000. Capped at 5.4%, we have an estimated market value of $1,755,000. On page 6 are some rent comparables. Shows the rent reviews are in line with what's in the market. On page 7 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the owner. In 2020, their income was $174,000, and their expenses were $139,000. But that included some mortgage expense and some principal reduction, I guess, negative expense. If you remove those items, their expenses for 2020 is about $89,000, and their income is about $84,000. But if you look at their 2019 net operating income, which is about $104,000, it's noticeably different from one year to the next. So if you take a look at to stabilize it using their 2020 income at $174,000 and the average expenses from 2019 to 2020, that works out to $81,000 in expenses, and the net operating income is about $92,000 or almost $93,000, and their actual NOI of about $92,000 supports the model NOI of about $94,000. On page 8 and 9 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales that range from 3.6% to 5.74%. And on page 10 is some cap rate information from Altus indicating a 4.3% cap. On page 13 to 16 are the income statements supplied by the owner. On page 17 is the permit that was taken out in 2013. If you look on the bottom of page 17, it's just a summary of some of the work and the sale price. The sale price plus the renovation costs. The sale price is about $1,150,000, and their indicated permit value is about $251,000 for a total of $1,401,000. So the sale price plus the renovation cost is about $1,401,000, but that was back in 2004. I believe that supports the current assessed value of $1,755,000, which is 8 or 7 years after the sale and renovation. So I believe the $1,400,000 supports the $1,755,000. So when you look at the actual NOI, it's very close to the model value, and I believe it supports the model value. The cap rate is supported by the market, and as indicated earlier, the sale price plus the rental is about $1,400,000, and that supports the current assessed value of $1,755,000. So I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $1,755,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Smith, do you have any questions?
Yes, so just to look at page 17 to start with, I guess. So what you've done, Mr. Wong, here is add the sale price and the renovation cost together in order to arrive at $1,401,880. Is this a cost approach? Is this a blended approach? What is that number?
It's an indication of how much money the property owners have put into it.
Okay, and does renovation cost directly translate into additional value 1 for 1?
I would say maybe potentially more.
Okay, I'll leave it there on that particular question. Let's flip back to page 7 then. So 2019 and 2020, and the only reason I do this is because it's coming up in every single brief here. So 2019, the income $176,495. If I flip forward to your page number 15, let's look at the items that are included in that revenue. The very last, so we have all of your typical things. They've accounted for rent, vacancy, residential discount, parking revenue, parking vacancy, laundry revenue, and then we have other revenue. Other revenue is typically interest and late fee charges, et cetera, right? Which are not included as part of revenue typically. Is that correct?
We don't normally include interest or more interest income or mortgage expense. I'm not sure what is composed of the other revenue.
Okay, so that would typically be deducted, which would bring down.
Well, if you could for sure tell me, if you could for sure indicate that it was interest income.
That's typically what those amounts are. This is not a property that has storage revenue. So if you make that deduction on that, that would obviously bring down the 2019 NOI. For 2020, I actually went through the exercise here. So there was 16, page number 13, there was additional revenue or other revenue of 1621.62. Again, typically this is interest and or late fee charges not included. If you deduct those, we get an income of 170.
Do you have anything that shows that the other revenue is interest?
The expenses from that would give us a net operating income of $82,570. That's the actual 2020 figure, which is significantly different than the 94,749 of the model. What you've done at the bottom of page 7 there, I gather this is an averaging of the expenses, not a stabilization. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Knight?
Just to further ask from Mr. Wong for clarification, do you have anything that supports the expense, that income to be interest income or whatever it may be?
Yeah, I don't have anything other than the.
Not Mr. Wong, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Mr. Smith is saying that that should be included, but we have no evidence to say what it is. Is that correct?
I think I'm saying it should be included because I don't have any indication that it is.
Right, and he's saying it shouldn't be included because
it shouldn't be included because it is interest, but I'm not sure if there's anything that.
I'm asking if anybody has any evidence to support either way.
Did you want me to answer your question?
Sure. Do you have any evidence to support what other revenue?
So in the actual data that they've provided here, no, they haven't broken it down, but in my experience with this property management firm, as well as with multifamily properties in general, if it's storage income, it'll refer to it as storage income. Should storage income be included? Not as a general rule, unless it's consistent and always there. Other income is nearly always interest that's earned on the money that they generate.
That's fine. That you're just saying it's usually. I was asking for actual evidence.
Yeah, I can't.
And we don't have any.
Provide you that other than.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions. So, Mr. Smith, when you're ready with your presentation.
Certainly. The only other thing that you see on occasion with multifamily properties, and it's nearly exclusively with towers, is cell phone tower revenue or things of that nature. And that's exceptionally rare and typically a considerably larger amount than what we're looking at here. So I'm quite confident of what I'm presenting with regard to the other income. So 257 Toronto, the property is built in 1966, 17 one-bedroom units, all the same. unit type for the subject property. We have photographs of them beginning on page number 4. You can see the interiors and the level of finish for the subject property. The site's shown on page 8, just north of Portage Avenue on Toronto Street, as well as the map giving you the location of the subject property in that West End area north of Portage Avenue. So let's move forward to the valuation itself. Property had reported rental revenue of $175,149 net of vacancy and required rental discounts. So as of the valuation date and in years preceding that, the Winnipeg marketplace was quite competitive, and property owners and managers were finding that they did need to provide discounts to the set rental rate in order to fill their units and draw renters. So that is, of course, the case with the subject property as well. And they had rental revenue of $175,149. We've given you the CMHC average rental market report there. Our average rent for the subject property, based on what they were bringing in, was $859 per month. And again, we're looking at all one-bedroom units in the west end of the city. To this, we add parking income, laundry income, and for 2020, they did actually indicate they had storage revenue, and I'm not seeing where I see this, of $414, not $1,621. That, I believe, was taken from a report that we did not end up including in this for some reason. In any case, their storage revenue doesn't approach the amount that is indicated in the year-end income and expense of $1,621, or for the prior year of $2,400 or whatever the amount was. Very marginal amount. We've also included that in our revenue stream. The expense side, we have 3.2% vacancy, which we've applied. Their actual expenses were $87,098. And we can move forward to capitalization rate. This is a private market apartment. All of our discussion with regard to cap rate remains the same here. And we are close to being in agreement with the city of Winnipeg with regard to the cap rate. We've used a cap rate of 5.5%. The city's model has a cap rate of 5.4%. City's model is making some very fine distinctions between properties. It's more typical to look at 0.25% increases in capitalization rates rather than 0.05% or 0.1% changes in cap rate value. As you can see from the national commercial brokerages in the material that they provide, a cap rate of 5.5%, certainly appropriate for the subject property. It is, it has been upgraded, as you can see from the photos, There's not, it's not in an area where you would look to renovate it any further, nor would you see any increase in rental value if you did for this subject location and this property. So it's essentially at the peak of what it's going to achieve. So we believe a cap rate of 5.5% is appropriate. It reflects the location of the property as well as the actual income and expenses it produces. So that is my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Wong, do you have any questions?
I guess just a small thing, but on your page A3, your second to last page.
Yep.
It's indicating that their laundry revenue is $22.65.
Yep.
So that's what they collected for laundry revenue, correct?
That's correct.
And on your page 19,
Yep.
It's indicating that the laundry income is $22.66, right?
I do have a $1 difference, yes.
Yeah. And it seems like you're applying the 3.2% vacancy to a number that has already been sort of includes vacancy. Does that seem like you're kind of double counting the vacancy here?
No. So we've removed, you look at the residential rent. So let's go through this. Page A3, we have residential rent of $171,830, to which we add the vacancy of $42.83 to come up with the $175,149. So that's top line, fully occupied, no vacancy applied. When we add the vacancy of 3.2% to our calculations on page number 19, when a unit goes vacant, that parking space also goes vacant, as does any use of the laundry and or storage. So there's also vacancy that is applicable to them. So we're not double counting. It's simply applying the appropriate vacancy to the property as a whole.
Okay. I guess I don't really want to belabor it too much, but if you go back to page A3,
yep,
you have a potential rent and then you have a residential vacancy, correct?
We have a residential rent and then we have a residential vacancy, yes.
Okay, so you have the potential and then you have the vacancy, right?
No, we have the rent collected and then we have the vacancy. So if you add those together, that is your potential rent.
Okay, I guess that's not necessarily the way that I see it. But
I can assure you that that is what how they do their accounting.
Yeah, because it also says like their parking revenue is $4,000, but then they're showing parking vacancy at, and so it seems like the parking revenue is their potential parking revenue.
Well, I can assure you that their residential rent is what they collected, and the vacancy is then the difference between that and the potential rent.
Okay. Okay. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Hutchings, do you have any questions?
Yes, just one. Mr. Smith, so for your calculation of the income of 182,689, I believe, that's what you're using to develop your market value on the property. That's only from 1 year that you're developing your market value?
That is correct, Mr. Hutchings. Yes, that is the information that we had available. And I think if you compare that to what the city has the income is very close in alignment on those 2 years.
Okay,
Expenses, obviously, we're in a bit of disagreement over those, but they do vary over time. So I don't feel that we would be out of line in the projection that we've made.
all right, thank you. That's my only question.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. And I have no questions either. So that concludes item number 5 on our agenda. And we'll now move to item number 6 on our agenda, 857 Wall Street. So Mr. Wong, when you are ready, please.
The subject property is 857 Wall Street. The roll number is 130-118-90000. This is a residential apartment block that's 4 stories high. It was built in 1995 and it has 28 suites with 7 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. It's just near Wall Street and Sargent Avenue. On page 4 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $811 to get a potential income of $272,000. We use a 3.2% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $263,000. And we use a 54% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $120,000. Kept at 5.05%, we have an estimated market value of $2,379,000. On page 5 are some rent comparables at the top that shows that the rents that we've applied are supported by the market. And on the bottom of page 5 are some expense comparables that range from 46 to 52%, which supports the expense ratio of 54% that has been applied. And on page 6 is a summary of the income and expenses for this property. So their income was $420,000, but taking out some interest and advances, their operating income was $414,000, and their expenses are $371,000. Removing their amortization and interest is their operating expenses are $162,000, and which gives their NOI to be $252,000. And their expenses don't include management, but if you did include management, their operating income would be about $231,000. Once again, this is a nonprofit. On page 7 and 8 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales that range from 3.6 to 5.74%. On page 9 and 10 is some Altus cap rate information indicating cap rate to be 4.3%. On page 12 are the market rents from CMHC, indicating that the 1-bedroom rent is around $832, which supports the model rent of $811. And on my last page is the statement of operations for the subject property. So the model rents that have been applied are supported by the market, and the expenses are also supported by the market. The cap rate that has been applied is supported by the market sales, and so when you look at the subject property from a market perspective, it is supported by the market, and I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $2,379,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Smith, do you have any questions?
Just the one. So looking at page 6 and page 13, the same question as always. The income there that would include $238,000 in MHRC subsidy, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that would dramatically change the NOI, would it not?
Well, it would, but I just when you look at it from the standpoint that this is what MHRC feels is necessary for the property to operate, it doesn't seem that bad.
So essentially, what I'm getting at here is that there shouldn't be a lot of reliance placed on the resulting net operating income from nonprofit properties. Is that fair to say? I believe you essentially said that in the beginning today.
I guess I said in the beginning that I'm not sure if it would be the most accurate to rely on the income or the expenses for nonprofits because they don't operate the same. So that's kind of how I feel.
It's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Hutchings, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight?
No, thanks.
Okay, and I have no questions either. Mr. Smith, when you're ready with your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So 857 Wall Street, we are looking at property owned by the Portuguese nonprofit housing corporation. It is obviously located on Wall Street in the west end of the city, west end area that is. Assessed at $2,379,000, and we have a market value for it of $2,071,000 based on market evidence. So let's look at the property. It's zoned M1. It's not zoned with a typical multifamily residential. That is the zoning for it. Built in 1989. We have exclusively one-bedroom units in the subject property. And the intent of the property, obviously as a nonprofit, is to provide affordable housing to low-income seniors renters in the core area of the city, this being the West End. Now, originally it was intended for the Portuguese community for the most part. They have, of course, subsequently had to expand that outside of that particular limitation. The valuation, well, let's look at photos quickly. Some exteriors on page 4. We have significantly less number of parking stalls than we do actual units. We have some photos of the interior, page 5, some of the units. There's one office space, and you can see the fit out of the units themselves. So fairly standard. They haven't been changed since 1989 or 1995 rather. I have a different year age built, which was taken from the city's information online. In any case, they're relatively close. The site itself, shown on page number 9, it is on the northeast corner of Wall Street in St. Matthews. So it's in that, on the edge of that Wall Erin industrial strip to the to the west of this and to the south of this is all industrial. And the location is shown on page 10 rather, again, in the west end area of the core of the city. Let's move on. Subject property is average, we would say, in terms of suite size and the build out, etc. So we have applied market average for the area, that being Midland, to the subject property. If you look at the CMHC chart, you can see where we take this from. One bedroom units, 833. Given the location of the property, it's certainly applicable for the subject. This gives us our gross rental revenue, $279,888, to which we add the parking revenue that they achieved in 2020. Vacancy, again, vacancy actually shows higher at 5.3% in the area, but we don't have vacancy stats for the building itself, so we've applied the City of Winnipeg vacancy rate of 3.2% in our valuation in order to be conservative in our estimate, as we typically are. The expense allowance, let's look at my page number 15. It gives you 3-year history of the reported income and expenses as submitted to the City of Winnipeg. As you can see, it's quite a number of line items here that are not included, which would nearly always be included, those being professional fees, some marginal amount of office supplies, advertising, certainly waste and snow removal, security, caretaker, maintenance supplies, etc. Right? So typically, all multifamily properties have these expenses. They've not accounted for them in their expense total, unless they have lumped them into R&M, which I don't believe they have. We have not included these additional amounts or any estimated amounts for those, as that would take the operating expenses to a level that wouldn't provide us with a fair market value. So we've left the line items that haven't been itemized alone and done our stabilization as shown on page number 15. Where appropriate, we've used the actuals, such as for insurance and property tax. We've reduced the R&M to $1,500 a unit, despite it being higher in all previous years. And we've made no additional allowances for those normal items. This produces a operating stabilized expense allowance of $149,827, which is 54.67%, certainly within the norm for a property such as this. Now, I'm just going to backtrack here quickly. So this is not to say that these other items are extravagant. In fact, the property management, and I believe I went through the exercise of calculating the 5%. This is actually under the 5%, I believe, at the level that they have there. Your utilities are your utilities. They're not greater or lesser because it's a nonprofit. The R&M, we've made the reduction, and the taxes are what they are. So in no sense are we overestimating the operating expenses for the subject. Let's move on to capitalization rate. Again, all of my commentary with regard to nonprofit properties and the complications of them with regard to any potential sale, theoretical sale, essentially, what an astute investor would look at in terms of the risk that they take on in purchasing a property such as this. Nothing has changed. In this case, we have all 1-bedroom units. There's no blend of units here at all. So in that sense, you're looking at narrowing your rental pool slightly as well from people that look for 2 bedrooms. It's a marginal difference, but it is there. And overall, again, given the location and all of the complicating factors we've discussed, we've applied a cap rate of 6% to the subject property. Now, is the property newer? Yes, built in either 89 or 95. It is somewhat newer, but that doesn't change all of the risk factors that we've discussed. So we've applied 6% to our valuation. Our valuation is summarized on page 22. So using the average rent for the area for the unit type, we're slightly higher than the city's estimate. We include the parking revenue, assign the same vacancy rate, and our expense allowance is marginally higher, giving us a slightly higher NOI capping this at 6% gives us our market value of $2,071,000. Again, we're being conservative in our estimate here. We go back and you compare this to say the property on 442 William, where we use the 6.5% cap rate, property being built originally in 1905. We could have been higher on that cap rate as well. We're keeping the overall value in mind here in our decision making with regard to the parameters. So the final market value comes to $2,071,000. The income and expenses included in the addenda, and that is my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Wong, do you have any questions for Mr. Smith?
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight?
No questions.
Thank you. And I have no questions either, so thank you very much. Mr. Smith? We'll now move to item 7 on our agenda. 64 Nassau Street North. Mr. Wong, whenever you are ready with your presentation, please.
The subject property is 64 Nassau Street North. The roll number is 120-325-74000. It's a residential apartment block that's 15 stories high. It was built in 1981 and has 127 suites with 25 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. Located in Osborne Village. This is a 55 plus seniors nonprofit rental housing project. On page 4 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $944 to get a potential income of $1,439,000. We use a 3.2% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $1,393,000. And we use a 45% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $756,000. Capped at 5.8%, we have an estimated market value of $13,038,000. 5 are some rent comparables, showing that the rents we've used are in line with what's in the market. And at the bottom of page 5 are some expense comparables, showing ranging from 43 to 48%, which supports the 45% that the model has applied. Page 6 is a summary of the expenses that were submitted by the owner. Once again, you don't necessarily want to look at the expenses because of a nonprofit because they're not very representative of the market. But in this particular case, their expenses are $720,000, and less amortization, their expenses are about $612,000, which is a little bit lower than what the model was estimated at $637,000. So the model has kind of overestimated the expenses as compared to what might be the actuals. On page 7 and 8 is income is information on how we calculated our cap rates and along with some cap rate sales that range from 3.6 to 5.74%. And on page 9 and 10 is some Altus information indicating that the cap rate is 4.3%. On page 12 are some CMHC market rent report. The subject property is in Fort Rouge. The rents for a 1-bedroom is $1,002 and a 2-bedroom is $1,309. And I believe that supports the model rent, which is $941. So the model rent that's been applied is supported by the market. The model expenses are also supported by the market expenses as well as potentially the actual expenses. And the model cap rate is supported by the market sales as well. So I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $13,038,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Smith, do you have any questions?
Yes, just on page number 6. So typically on this page, we're looking at income and then expenses and then an NOI. Is there a reason that the income is not included in this particular one?
Yes, maybe I felt the expenses might be a little bit more relevant, but
Okay.
and that would be it.
Okay. Would they be higher? Would the income reported be higher or lower than the projection of the city?
The income, the projected income is lower than what the model is estimated.
Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings?
Yes, thank you. Just for the location, Mr. Wong, are we located on Nassau between River and Roslyn Road, I guess? Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question.
Thank you very much. I have no questions, so Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So our subject property, 64 Nassau Street North. We have some background on the property on my page number 3. Subject property is built in 1981. We have a total of 127 units, 112 of those being 1-beds and 15 2-bed units in total. The property was appealed in both 2020 and 2018. Both of those decisions at the Board of Revision are under appeal at the Municipal Board, and we anxiously await scheduling for those. So you can see that the 2023 assessment is $13,038,000. Our valuation of the property based on actuals as well as market evidence is $11,847,000. This is in no way based on either this assessment or the prior assessments, but you can see the relation of the property, our valuation to that information. The property that we are dealing with, again, is a nonprofit. It is a seniors nonprofit organization entitled Astra Nonprofit Housing Corporation. It is incorporated to construct, hold, and manage an elderly citizens rest home. And their mandate is to provide affordable rental accommodation to seniors. So that is the property that we are looking at. So that being said, let's have a quick look at the property. We have some photos of the exterior. This particular property has had some considerable issues with their balconies and deterioration of that particular part of the structure. They've had significant costs with maintaining those on an ongoing basis. It's not unusual in the marketplace for properties with balconies. In fact, I've in discussions with some property management professionals in the industry in Winnipeg. Balconies are becoming a considerable source of concern with regard to ongoing expenses and capital expenditure. So subject property itself does have some additional areas that would not be present in a in a typical market apartment, as you can see on the top of page 5, they have kind of an open room that they use both for games and meetings. You can see standard hallway on page 5, as well as the build out of the units on pages 6, 7, and some issues on page 8. As you can see from the finishes, they are original essentially to 1981. The only differences being when a unit becomes damaged or worn to such an extent that they're essentially forced to do an upgrade, or rather a renovation, or what they call a refresh to that particular unit. Now, they refresh it in the same style, essentially, or the same level of finish. So it's not 1981 flooring, but it would be of a comparable utility and finish level. But by and large, that being said, most of the property, the vast majority of the units are original to 1981, and you can see the finish level there. The issue with balconies, as I discussed, you can see on page 8. And page 9 just covers this again, very basic accommodation level. The units themselves are actually smaller than typical comparable rental units would be, due to the intent of supplying the maximum number of low-income rental units for the site on which they had to build. So they've maximized the number of units they could provide for the space available. That also leading to the overabundance of 1 bedrooms versus 2 bedrooms. The property also has, as I mentioned, that large multi-purpose room, lounge and games room. Again, these are not typical to your average market apartment. Property site is shown on page number 10, and the location on page number 11. Let's move into valuation. CMHC market averages are provided. Obviously, we have a property that receives its income on a rent geared to income basis, as well as any subsidy that's provided in order to make up operating shortfalls. Typically, most of these were developed in the 70s and 80s. So you have, in many cases, properties that are still operating under onerous mortgage payments, which necessitates significant support. Let's look at market leasing analysis. So again, we have smaller units, very dated, and the CMHC market averages for Fort Rouge would be inappropriate, frankly. Comes up every time I do this property, and I've inspected all of the properties that we're dealing with here today. I've been in these units. They're smaller, they're older, they're dated. You're not going to generate the same rent for these that you would for a standard market apartment in the area. What we have done is apply the CMHC market average for the 4 sections of the core area, which includes the Fort Rouge area, less a deduction of 5% for the subject property based on the size and the finish of the units. So that core area average, as you can see, is shown at the bottom. So our 1 and 2 bedrooms, we've deducted 5% from those market averages. If you flip forward, you can see that this produces our gross rental revenue on page 14 of $1,400,832. The parking revenue we've added in for 2020, and we can flip forward to the actual expenses for the subject property. So if we look at the area, 3.2% is certainly appropriate. So we have used that in our analysis. Let's move forward to the expenses. Interestingly, subject property has filed their income and expenses every year. However, that information was not available online for us for 2019. So what we have are the 2018 and 2020 year-end operating statements in which to make our stabilization for 2021. So for the stabilization, you can see how this was done. We have made estimates where appropriate. Obviously, they have an annual audit that's done. We've provided a minimal amount for bank charges, advertising, minimal amount. Professional fees, your accounting on an annual basis is going to run you that much at a minimum. Office admin, we've made it a 3-year average, etc. We can run through each of them, but we don't need to. Replacement reserve, this is an actual requirement of Manitoba Housing and Rehabilitation Corporation for their subsidy to be provided to the property. We're not including it in our expense allowance. So that is also stricken. We've charged 5% for the property management, applied only $1,500 per unit for the R&M, despite it being higher in 2020, etc. You can see how the stabilization was done. So in no sense in any of these particular line items are we overestimating what it would cost to operate this property. It's being brought down to market level. So our stabilized expense allowance for 2021 comes to $655,850. Again, our capitalization rate information remains the same. We have a property that is a restricted nonprofit property. All of the risk factors that I've discussed already are applicable to the subject property. The fact that it's located in the Osborne Village area doesn't impact that. Any potential astute investor would see the same risks that I see in the subject, and that the market professionals see as well. And so we have applied the upper end of the standard cap rate range of 6% to the subject property. Let's look at our summary of this on page 23. So we've applied what we believe to be an appropriate rental income based on market averages, less a slight deduction for the particularly small unit size and build out. Only market vacancy, and the expenses have been appropriately stabilized. This gives us NOI of $710,000, capped at a conservative 6%, gives us our final market value of $11,847,000. Now, if we look forward to my page A6, we've made no additional allowance for any impact of COVID. As you can see, they're indicating they've had a significant impact in terms of the expenses that they've taken on, which are in the neighborhood of $14,000 for the year in question. That is my presentation, and I'm open for questions. The only additional thing I would again point out, and I'm not sure that the income and expense are necessarily going to show this for that particular year, but again, on an ongoing basis, they have capital expenditures for the repair of the structure of the balconies.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Wong, do you have any questions?
just on your page 16.
Yep.
I guess for the repair and maintenance, you indicated that you're using 1,500 per unit for repair and maintenance, but when I do 1,500 times the 127 units, that's about 190,500. Is that a typo?
Well, let me just have a look at it here. That's probably an average of the 2 years, if you bear with me for a couple of moments. So that is an average of the 2 years that were reported. And when we do the calculation, it comes out to $1,860 per unit. We're looking at a how many stories are we looking at here? Multi-story high-rise with elevator cab, etc., as well as the issues we've discussed regarding the balconies. 1860 is not certainly not out of line for a property such as that. When we look at the 1,500 per unit as an average, which unfortunately this is a typo, that's more typically in relation to 2.5, 3-story walk-ups. And there are additional costs that are taken on with high rises.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering if it was a typo.
Yep, it is.
That's all my questions.
That's all your questions? Mr. Hutchings?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, and neither do I. Okay, that concludes item number 7 on our agenda. Moving to item number 8, 33 Edmonton Street. Mr. Wong, whenever you're ready.
The subject property is 33 Edmonton Street. The roll number is 120-926-42500. It's a residential apartment block that's 9 stories high. It was built in 1976 and it has 97 units with 14 outdoor parking stalls. On page 2 is the sales history of the subject property. It sold in March 2019 for $6,550,000. So the subject property was also appraised at $6,550,000. So it looks like they took the appraisal and used that price for the sale price, for the purchase price. That was in November 2018. I believe this the $6,550,000 supports the assessed value of $7,023,000 because the $7,023,000 is as of April 1st, 2021, rather than November 9th, 2018. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. Just on Edmonton, or beside the legislature. On page 4 is some information on the subject property. So it appears that the rents are geared towards income and it is subsidized. On page 5 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $732 to get a potential income of $852,000. We used a 4.7% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $812,000. And we used a 55% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $361,000. Kept at 5.15%. We have an estimated market value of $7,023,000. On page 6 are some rent comparables showing that the rents we've used are in line with what's in the market, as well as some expense comparables which range from 43 to 50%, which it supports the model rate, which has been applied at 55%. On page 7 is a summary of the income and expenses for the property. Their indicated net operating income for this nonprofit is $502,000, which is higher than the $361,000 that the model is estimated. On page 8 and 9 is information on how we derived our cap rates, as well as some cap rate sales that range from 3.6 to 5.74%. On page 10 and 11 is information from Altus indicating the cap rate to be 4.3%. On page 13 is some CMHC market rent info. The subject property is comprised almost of all bachelors, like 96 bachelors in 1 2-bedroom. The subject property is in the Centennial region, and the CMHC rent of $775 supports the model rent of $732. And the last few pages are the mailers support supplied by the owner. So the model rent expenses and the model cap rate is supported by the market, and the appraised value supports the model value, or the appraised value and the sale price support the model value. So I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $7,023,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Smith, do you have any questions?
Yes, just briefly. So just trying to get a handle on the model and the capitalization rate. So for the subject property, we have property built in 1976. It is a multi-story tower, all bachelor units, and the cap rate is 5.15%. In our prior property, very comparable in terms of location, 5 years newer, built in 81, also a tower, largely 1-bedrooms. We have a cap rate of 5.8%. Just wondering how the model arrives at these figures.
I'm not sure about the details of how the cap rate is selected for the different properties, but it appears that the 5.145% is supported by some market sales, but also that the 5.15% estimates a value of $7 million, which seems to be very much in line with the market value.
Okay, that's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Hutchings?
I have to ask Mr. Wong, how does this property get classified as a class code 40 and school exempt? It just sticks out compared to the rest that we've dealt with today.
Yeah. I am not 100% sure about this property, but my thinking is that it is for the elderly and the infirmed, which would make it institutional and qualify for the school tax exemption.
Okay, so the property owner had applied for that exemption and was granted it? Would that be accurate?
That's typically what happens, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question. Thank you.
Yes, actually, there in my notes they do have an elderly and infirmed license.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So just on that point, let's clarify that, I guess. It's not entirely different than all the properties here today. In fact, the property that we just dealt with, 64 Nassau Street, is also institutional school tax exempt. Also an elderly and infirm housing license. Part of the qualification for that, of course, is having units of a certain size or under a certain size. And each of these properties would meet that particular requirement. So this is not a thing that is in dispute. It's not something that gives it a particular benefit that it shouldn't have, or anything of that nature. They have appropriately applied and qualified for the institutional school tax exempt, and they meet all those qualifications.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Let's look at another particular point that has come up, that being the sale price. So which is termed appraised value on the City of Winnipeg's page 2. So did the property trade in November 9th, 2018 for $6,550,000? Yes, it did. Now, should that be considered market value for the subject? No, it should not. And here's the reason. It's a trade from a government body, public corporation, Manitoba Housing, to the nonprofit organization that was running the property, that being Villa Heidelberg Inc. So Manitoba Housing owned the property, and they were going through an exercise of disposing of quite a number of their properties to the operating entity for those particular properties. Now, if you go through the assessment methodology through the IAAO, or as well as the Appraisal Institute of Canada methodology, trades that happen between government corporations from government corporations are not to be considered evidence of market value. So by its very nature, this sale does not speak to market value for the subject property. So I can see that the city is somewhat higher than that value for 2023, but we certainly dispute $6,550,000 being the accurate market value based on that particular transaction. So let's move forward to our property here today again, 33 Edmonton. Built in 1976, we have 97 units, 96 of those being bachelor units. So this is an extraordinary development. It's something that Manitoba Housing did in a number of their developments that they built. One other one that springs to mind is, I believe the address was 180 Smith, where they had 2 floods occur, as well as a fire, I believe. In any case, property went vacant. Housing did not repair the property due to the costs, and they subsequently sold the property. And that was largely bachelor units, and the developer for the property entirely changed the build out of the property, reduced the number of units, but expanded the bedroom count. So pretty clearly 96 bachelor units is not a standard development, and is not a desirable aspect of an investment property for a purchaser, for an investor. So let's look at this quickly. Page number 3, 9-story building, 97 total units. I did not count our parking stalls, but they don't have a parking. They don't have a parking lot as such. They simply have the area behind the building between it and the rear lane. There's perhaps 10 stalls in total. If you count them, I may have noted this in my description, I'm not sure, but very minimal on-site parking. The units themselves are original to the 1976 date. and obviously show the wear and tear that you would accrue over that time period. They also have additional area that you wouldn't typically have for a market apartment, that being a library area or room, a meeting room used for fitness equipment, and that is all on the main floor. The units themselves are quite small, and the condition of the units I would probably put at average to below average. You can see the interiors of the units beginning on page 5, and again, all of them being bachelor units. The site is shown on page number 9. It's just north of Assiniboine, and the location is shown on page 10, south of Broadway. Let's move into the valuation. We're not in disagreement with the city on the gross rental income, so I will skip that aspect. One thing I will point out is that the city's estimation of gross potential income takes into account other revenue sources, that being parking as well as laundry. We've added the parking revenue that they generated to our valuation. To be conservative, moving on, estimated expenses. We've applied a vacancy rate of 4.7%, which is appropriate based on vacancy in bachelor units in the area it sits in. We've given you a stabilized expense projection for 2021 based on their actuals as shown on page 15. You can see how we've done this. Where appropriate, we've made averages, and where necessary, we've made adjustments such as to the property management as well as to the repair and maintenance. Our resulting stabilized expense allowance is $471,427, or 57.74% of effective gross income. Again, this falls under kind of the top end of the range that we see in the market as well. The capitalization rate discussion we've gone through already. Please keep in mind my discussion of the complications of a theoretical purchase of nonprofit property, and all of the additional risks that an astute investor would apply. We've given you the same comps. We have the same information from the national brokerages giving us cap rate range of between 5 and 6%. For all the reasons discussed, we are applying a cap rate of 6% to the subject property. Now, I will emphasize, and this is not to take away from our valuation of the other properties, but I will emphasize that we're being conservative in applying a 6% cap rate to the subject property. When we look at the breakout of the units, having 96 bachelor units, so nearly 100% bachelor units, this is not a highly prized unit breakout in the market. Bachelors give you less rent. They're less, if you were theoretically able to renovate them and change their rent, you're only going to get, again, a lesser lift in revenue than you would on 1 and 2 bedrooms. Typically, they're less desirable in the marketplace, so you see greater vacancy. All in all, it's something that an investor would pay less for. So in using the same 6% cap rate, we're being very conservative. So our market value comes to $5,750,000. Income and expense are included. Again, I would stress that the trade of the property in 2018 is not an indication of market value, despite there being an appraisal that was done. that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Wong, do you have any questions?
So are you aware of the appraisal that was done?
I'm aware that there was an appraisal that was done, yes.
And it was for market value for the apartment building?
It was, well, let's look at the addenda of my report and see what they've included. I've been very clear with my discussion of the sale price of $6,550,000 and why it shouldn't be considered as evidence of market value. And as I'd stated, both the assessment methodology as well as appraisal methodology indicate that trades of this nature are by their very nature not to be included as evidence of market value.
Is the appraiser a certified appraiser?
To be honest, I have not looked at the appraisal. I haven't seen it. I'm not going to comment on another appraisal professional's work. So I really couldn't tell you. I would assume that they are, but again, you have my commentary with regard to the sale price.
Okay. And are you, I guess, are you aware that they used a 5% cap rate in the appraisal?
I have no idea what they used in their appraisal, and I would estimate that. Well, in fact, no. I'm not going to speculate on what they have and haven't done in the appraisal.
That would be all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Hutchings, do you have any questions?
Well, on that note about the appraisal, Mr. Smith, on your page A1, there's the sales questionnaire, and question number 5 was a market value appraisal report or opinion value completed at the time of the sale, and it says yes, and it does list the $6,550,000. What would be your comment on that question?
Well, my comment with regard to that would be that
I'm sorry, maybe I'm being unfair asking you that question because you weren't involved with the appraisal. So I'm just not
involved with the appraisal. All I can say is that it appears as though the parties, perhaps or a party, I don't know whose appraisal this is.
Yeah,
had an appraisal done. I don't know who did it, but again, a trade between a government body and anybody else is inadmissible as market evidence of market value, whether an appraisal is done or not.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchings. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just have to go back to this $6,550,000. Was there an actual sale where monies were handed over from Villa Heidelberg to whoever the owner was previously for $6,550,000, or this is just a paper thing?
Well, let's look at the evidence that they've provided here on page A1 and A2 of my addenda. So they indicate that they put down cash of 25% and had a mortgage for the balance.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you very much, Ms. Knight. And I have no questions.
Now, I guess my additional comment there would be where they obtained $1.6 million as a nonprofit. I couldn't tell you where their funding for that came from. It's probably not sitting in their bank account.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Is there a desire for summation?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Then we have heard all the items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much for your presentations.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Thank you.